"Grandma, they're sending you to a home today," my 8-year-old granddaughter whispered, her little voice trembling as she looked over her shoulder. That was the moment my world shifted. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized my own son and his wife had finally crossed a line I couldn't ignore. My name is Eleanor Whitaker. And this is the story of how the quiet old woman they tried to discard walked away from the only family he had, carrying a $17 million secret they never saw coming. I had been sitting in my favorite recliner, the one my late husband Walter gave me for our 20th anniversary knitting, and watching young Leela age. A dolls she was visiting for the weekend, while my son, David, and his glamorous wife Stephanie attended yet another charity gala downtown. At least that's what they told me. But when Leela looked into my eyes and whispered what she'd overheard the night before, I knew the truth. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about convenience and control. That day, I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I simply stood up, went to my bedroom, opened a jewelry box, and took out a key they never knew existed. They thought I was a burden. They thought I had no options. What they didn't know, I had quietly protected the legacy Walter left behind, and now everything was about to change. Follow my story, because by the end, you'll see why sometimes the people they underestimate the most are the ones they should fear the most. I sat in the quiet of my bedroom, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. In my hands was a small brass key. Cool and familiar, Walter had tucked it under the velvet lining of the jewelry box he made for me by hand, back when we were newlyweds in Tulsa. That little key didn't unlock a door. It unlocked a future no one but Walter and I ever knew existed. 5 years ago, the world lost Walter to pancreatic cancer. It took only 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. The day we found out, we sat in Dr. Connolly's office, our hands clenched together so tightly it hurt. When the doctor left the room, Walter turned to me and said, "Ellie, promise me something. Don't tell David about the patents, not yet. Let him grow on his own. Let's see what kind of man he becomes." You see, Walter wasn't just a husband, he was an inventor, not the flashy kind with labs and white coats. He was the kind who tinkered in the garage after dinner while the rest of the neighborhood watched TV. Over the years, he created a dozen small inventions, nothing big at first: a better jar opener, a silent cabinet hinge, a retractable garden hose reel that didn't tangle, things no one thought much of, until one of them hit big. It started with a stray dog named Gus. He kept getting into our trash every night, and Walter, being Walter, decided to solve the problem. He built a timed pet feeder out of scrap metal and an old microwave timer. It was crude, but it worked. A friend saw it and mentioned a contact at a pet supply company. That one prototype turned into a meeting. That meeting turned into a licensing deal. And then royalty checks started showing up. The first one was for $12,000. Walter stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. "Ellie," he said, "I think we've got something here." And we did. The pet feeder turned into a series of related patents: timed dispensers for medicine, irrigation systems for small gardens, even programmable bird feeders for the local nature club. Each one modest, each one smart, and each one quietly earning. Walter wasn't interested in flash or fame. We invested everything conservatively: mutual funds, treasury bonds, rental properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. Over 15 years, that little stream of royalties grew into a river. But even as the money accumulated, we kept living the same way: coupon clipping, Sunday pot roasts, church picnics, because that's who we were. When David graduated from Georgia Tech and married Stephanie, a polished, ambitious woman who wore heels to brunch, we decided to keep the truth to ourselves. Stephanie came from money. She liked to talk about wine cellars and European resorts, neither of which Walter nor I had any interest in. She also made it clear early on that she thought David was too attached to his mother. Walter saw through her from the beginning. She's not in this for love, he told me once while we were folding laundry. She's in this for lifestyle. But we stayed silent. We believed David had to figure it out for himself. We wanted him to build something of his own, not live in the shadow of our success. So we lived quietly, never flaunting, never mentioning what was locked away behind that safety deposit box at First National Bank after Walter passed. I kept his promise. I told David there wasn't much left, just the house and a small pension, and he didn't question it. In fact, over time, he started calling less. Stopped inviting me to things unless it was last minute. Stephanie once forgot my birthday. Entirely. Didn't mind, not at first. I had my memories, my porch swing, my Sunday crossword. And I had Leela, my sweet Leela, whose love hadn't been touched by greed or grown-up indifference. But now they wanted to put me away, sell my house, move me like furniture. I placed the key in my purse, along with the letter Walter had written. The week before he passed, Ellie, you'll know when it's time to tell the truth. Trust your gut. Use the money to protect the people who matter. Well, Walter, I think it's time. By the time David and Stephanie pulled into my driveway later that afternoon, I was already packed. Not with much, just a few changes of clothes, my medications. The locket Walter gave me on our 40th anniversary, and one small, worn envelope, the kind that doesn't look like much, but could unravel everything they thought they knew about me. They thought I'd be waiting like I always was, sitting politely in that blue recliner, accepting whatever decision they'd made on my behalf. But I wasn't waiting. Not anymore. I'd spent 30 years on this street, raised David in this very house. I'd waved to neighbors from the porch, baked pies for the church fundraiser, clipped coupons at the kitchen table, and now they wanted to pack me up like I was a sofa too old for their living room. So I walked out the front door with my purse over my shoulder and my dignity intact. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I just locked it behind me and started walking down Maple Avenue toward the bus stop. My knees ached and my heart was heavy. But there was something else stirring beneath it all, something I hadn't felt in years. Liberation. At the corner, I boarded the 4:15 bus to downtown. The driver, a kind-faced woman probably close to my age, looked at me and smiled. Where to, hon? First National Bank, I said. My voice came out steady, firm, and take your time. I'm not in a rush today. As the bus rumbled through familiar streets past the library, where I'd taken David to story time, past the grocery store, where I knew the cashiers by name, I felt a strange clarity. I wasn't running away, I was walking into the next chapter. On my terms, they didn't know who they were pushing. They saw an aging woman with grey hair and soft cardigans. Someone whose value expired the moment she started asking for rides or forgot where she left her reading glasses. They didn't know about the other Eleanor Whitaker, the woman who handled every dime Walter brought in, tracked every royalty, built a portfolio that would make their financial advisor choke on his coffee. They never even thought to ask. The bank was quiet when I stepped inside. Polished marble floors, soft as playing over the speakers. The same young man at the front desk greeted me, his smile polite, if a bit distracted. I'd like to speak with Mr. Davidson, I said. Tell him Eleanor Whitaker's here, and I'll need access to all of my boxes. Something in his expression changed, like someone had just flipped a switch. Of course, Mrs. Whitaker. Right this way. Moments later, I was being led through the vault door, past rows of safety deposit boxes, into a private room I hadn't stepped into since Walter died. Davidson entered. His tone suddenly warmer than I remembered. It's been a while. Mrs. Whitaker, I trust everything's been well with your accounts. Perfectly, I said, placing my purse on the table. But I think it's time to make a few changes. He opened the boxes with practiced care, but I could tell just from the way he adjusted his tie that he'd seen the numbers $17,200,000. That's what Walter's tinkering had become, and that's what I'd quietly guarded for 5 years while the people who were supposed to love me most started planning my disposal. Inside one of the folders was Walter's final letter, the one where he said, "Only reveal the truth when your instinct tells you it's time, and Ellie, protect what matters, even from your own." I looked down at the balance sheets, the patents, the notarized documents, and I realized Walter had given me more than a fortune. He'd given me a weapon, and now I had a reason to use it. My phone buzzed. A message from David. "Mom, where are you? We need to talk. Are you home?" I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I asked Mr. Davidson for a conference room. "I'll need to make a few arrangements," I told him. Because the woman they tried to discard, she was about to become their next-door neighbor, and this time, she wouldn't be quiet. 2 days after I walked out of my home, I sat alone in a modest hotel room 3 miles from my son's house. The curtains were drawn, the room smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant, and the TV played low in the background. I wasn't watching it, I was waiting. Beside me sat a thick manila envelope, a preliminary report from a private investigator named Marjorie Chen, a quiet woman in her 50s with steel grey hair and eyes sharp as needles. Mr. Davidson at the bank had recommended her. I told her I needed the truth no matter how unpleasant it was. She delivered. When my cell phone rang, I recognized Marjorie's number immediately. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said calmly. "I have findings you'll want to see in person, but I can give you the overview now." I braced myself. "Your son David and daughter-in-law Stephanie are in debt deep, credit cards maxed out, a second mortgage on their home, car payments onto luxury vehicles they can't afford. But that's not the worst of it." I gripped the phone tighter. "Go on." "Stephanie has been researching eldercare institutions for the past 6 months, not reputable ones either. Some of these places have long lists of state violations, neglect, unsanitary conditions, even abuse reports." I sat back against the headboard, the air knocked from my lungs. 6 months, yes, ma'am, this wasn't spur of the moment. It's been a coordinated effort. I also discovered that she's been telling neighbors you're becoming confused, possibly developing dementia. She's laying the groundwork for what looks like a conservatorship claim. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, the way Mrs. Tilson next door had spoken so slowly to me last week like I was a child made sense. They'd already started turning the neighborhood against me. "And Leela?" I asked, my throat tightening. "That's what's most heartbreaking," Marjorie said. "From what I've observed, Leela is largely ignored. She makes her own breakfast, walks to school alone. After school, she's often left at a neighbor's until someone remembers to pick her up. David's working long hours trying to cover bills. And Stephanie's shopping." I felt hot tears fill my eyes. They weren't for me, they were for Leela, that sweet girl who still believed in birthday cards, sidewalk chalk, and whispering secrets to her grandma. She was being raised in a home where money meant more than love, and I had allowed it because I had hoped David would grow into a man worthy of the legacy Walter left behind. That hope was fading. After we hung up, I opened the envelope Marjorie had dropped off earlier. Inside were photographs, printed screenshots, receipts, bank records, and a detailed timeline. I read it cover to cover, my hands trembling. Everything had started the day they received the property tax assessment on my house. The market had gone up. The house Walter and I bought for $62,000 in 1985 was now worth nearly $400,000. That was the turning point. Stephanie hadn't seen me as a burden, she saw me as equity, a quick way out of their mess. Put me in a facility, sell the house, pocket the difference, and never have to deal with me again. I opened Walter's notebook, the one I'd pulled from the safety deposit box. His neat handwriting greeted me like an old friend. On the last page, he'd written, "Money without wisdom is a burden, but wisdom without courage is useless when the time comes. Ellie, don't just survive. Protect what matters." I took a deep breath. I had tried to survive, too. Keep the peace. To believe that time would teach David what life hadn't. But now I had to protect. I reached for my phone and dialed Marjorie again. "I need proof of everything," I said. "I want it documented. The debts, the neglect, the lies, I want pictures, I want dates, I want recordings, if you can get them." There was a pause on the other end. "Mrs. Whitaker, are you planning legal action?" "No," I replied. "I'm planning to protect my granddaughter, whatever that takes." The next morning, I stood on the sidewalk across from David and Stephanie's house, parked discreetly behind a row of shrubs in my rental car. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Manicured lawn, fresh mulch, a wreath on the front door. It was the kind of house people drove by and thought, "That's a nice family." They had no idea what was happening behind those shutters. Through the large front window, I saw Stephanie on the phone, pacing the living room in her silk robe, waving her arms in that dramatic way she always did when things weren't going her way. David sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, head hanging low. Leela wasn't in sight. I didn't go to the door. I didn't want confrontation, not yet. Instead, I drove straight to the address Marjorie had given me the day before, 235 Maple Lane, the house next door. It was a cozy two-story colonial with white siding and a wraparound porch. Nothing extravagant, but it backed up directly to David's backyard. From the upstairs window, I could see straight into Lila's bedroom. A for sale sign leaned slightly in the front yard. The words "motivated seller, cash offers welcome" scrawled in red across the bottom. I called the number. The real estate agent answered on the second ring. "I'm prepared to make a full cash offer," I said. "No contingencies. Close in 2 weeks." "Mum," he replied, startled. "You haven't even toured the I don't need to," I interrupted. "I know exactly where I want to be." An hour later, the offer was accepted. I smiled as I signed the purchase documents. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were planning to lock me away. And I was buying the house next door, but this wasn't about vengeance. It was about proximity, about staying close to Leela, about protecting what Walter and I had built, not just in wealth, but in values, in love, in family. That evening, I met again with Marjorie in my hotel room. She laid out the expanded investigation results across the table like a courtroom presentation. Timelines of internet searches for elder care facilities, evidence of financial stress, screenshots of texts, photographs of Leela walking to school, alone in the rain while her parents were still in bed. "She's not being physically abused," Marjorie said, her voice low and steady. "But she's being emotionally neglected, chronically, repeatedly." I nodded, my jaw tight. "It's enough to build a custody case." Marjorie hesitated. "It's a start, but you'll need legal backing. A family law attorney, someone who knows how to navigate grandparent rights." "I already have someone," I replied. "Walter's attorney, Richard. He's been with us for over 20 years. It's time to bring him in." Marjorie reached across the table and tapped one photo gently. It showed Leela sitting alone at the kitchen table, head down, a bowl of cereal in front of her, no parent in sight. "This," she said, "is your reason, not revenge." "I know," I whispered, because the truth was I didn't want to destroy David or even punish Stephanie. I wanted to wake them up, shake them from this madness they'd allowed to take over their lives. But more than that, I wanted to make sure Leela had one safe place left in the world, a home where she could be a child, not collateral damage. After Marjorie left, I sat at the window, watching the street lights flicker on one by one. Somewhere beyond those lights, Leela was probably getting ready for bed, maybe wondering where Grandma had gone, maybe already being told I was sick or confused. Well, that story was about to change, and I wasn't just coming back with words, I was coming back with property records, legal protection, and a trust fund that no one could touch but Leela. They thought they'd silenced the old woman in the blue recliner. They were about to meet Eleanor Whitaker, the grandmother who chose love over fear, action over silence, and legacy over convenience, and I was just getting started. Saturday afternoon. I arrived at David and Stephanie's doorstep, right on time to PM sharp. I wore the same navy blue coat Stephanie once called quaint. My purse was the same old leather one I'd carried for years, its handles worn soft, its contents far more dangerous now. I looked like the woman they expected, quiet, humble, outdated. But I wasn't the same. David opened the door with forced relief in his eyes. Mom, thank God, we've been worried sick. Where have you been? I stepped inside without answering. The air smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh-cut hydrangeas, Stephanie's way of curating comfort. It didn't work on me anymore. Stephanie glided in from the kitchen, her makeup perfect, her smile stiff. Clarice, she said, her voice honeyed and false. We were so frightened. You can't just vanish like that. I'm 66, not 6, I replied evenly. I don't need a permission slip to leave my own home. Their eyes flickered. They weren't expecting that tone from me. Before they could recover, Leela came bounding down the stairs. Grandma, she cried, flinging herself into my arms. I missed you so much. Mommy said you were at the doctor. I hugged her tight. No, sweetheart, I'm not sick. I'm perfectly fine. Over her shoulder, I saw Stephanie flinch. Lie number 1 exposed. Leela, why don't you head upstairs and draw me a picture while I talk with your parents? I said gently. She pouted, but nodded. Promise you won't leave again, I promise. Once she was out of sight, I took the armchair across from the couch, Walter's old recliner, the one David had taken after the funeral. Fitting, I thought. David cleared his throat. Mom, we really do need to talk about your living situation. Stephanie and I have been researching some excellent assisted living communities, safe, clean, with activities and round-the-clock help. We just want what's best for you. Stephanie chimed in. These places are designed to help seniors thrive. We're not trying to take anything away from you. We're helping. I reached into my purse and placed a thick folder on the coffee table. You mean places like Golden Valley Care Center, where the state found mold in patient rooms, or Sunset Acres, which was fined for understaffing and medication errors. Their faces paled. You've been planning this for 6 months, I continued, not out of concern but because you're in over $200,000 of debt and my house is your lifeline. David's mouth opened, but I raised a hand. I'm not done. Double quotes next. I placed my phone on the table. The screen glowed. Recording in progress. I know about the lawyer Stephanie met with, the one who specializes in conservatorship. I know about the stories you've told the neighbors, claiming I'm confused and unstable. Stephanie's jaw clenched. Those are misunderstandings. No, I interrupted. Those are lies, and I've documented every single one. David rubbed his hands together nervously. Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. Things got out of control. We didn't know what else to do. You mean you didn't think I'd find out? I said. Then, slowly, I pulled out Walter's notebook. Patent records, royalties, investments, and at the bottom of it all a current financial statement. I turned it toward them. $17.2 million, I said. That's what I've been quietly managing for the last 5 years while you both assumed I had nothing. Stephanie gasped. David stared like he'd seen a ghost. You were planning to put Me in a home so you could sell my house and maybe walk away with a few $100,000. Meanwhile, I was living modestly out of choice, not necessity. Their world cracked open. I stood. Here's what's going to happen. I've purchased the house next door. I'll be moving in next week. I've already set up a $5 million trust fund for Leela, which neither of you can touch. Stephanie looked as if she might faint. $5 million, and as for the two of you, I added, you have a decision to make. You can rebuild trust through honesty and change, or you can keep digging this hole and find out just how deep I can bury a legal response. David stood, stunned. Mom, I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet, I replied. Just show me you're still the boy Walter and I raised, the one who cried when he lost his dog and insisted we hold a funeral. The silence hung heavy between us. I'll be upstairs saying goodbye to my granddaughter, I said, turning to the staircase. And if either of you ever lie to her about me again, I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. 6 weeks later, I was sitting on the front porch of my new home at 237 Maple Lane, watching Leela ride her bike in lazy circles across the driveway. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting a golden haze over the quiet street. Crickets had just started singing, and the world felt peaceful. The house wasn't fancy. 2 stories, wrap-round porch, hardwood floors that creaked with character. But it was mine, bought with cash, no mortgage, no strings. And it sat just 30 yards from the people who once planned to lock me away. But I wasn't there to spy. I was there for Leela. Since the day I moved in, she'd come over almost daily after school, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a new drawing in her hand. We baked cookies, planted tomatoes in raised beds out back, and organized a collection of painted rocks by color and shape. We even built a small bird house together, something I hadn't done since Walter passed, and little by little, I saw it in her eyes: relief, safety, belonging. Children might not understand legal documents or financial betrayal, but they understand love. They can feel it in a hug that lingers, in a warm kitchen that always smells like cinnamon, in a grown-up who looks them in the eyes and listens. One afternoon, while we were spreading mulch around the marigolds, she looked up at me and said, "Grandma, I like it here better. It's quieter, you don't yell." I swallowed the lump in my throat and kissed the top of her head. "You're always welcome here, sweetheart, always." David began stopping by after work, tentative at first, standing at the edge of the porch like a boy asking permission. I didn't make it easy for him. I wasn't ready to pretend everything was okay, but I didn't slam the door either. He started small, asking how Leela was doing, offering to help fix the fence, dropping off a bag of mulch without being asked. One evening, he showed up with a blueberry pie from my favorite bakery, the same one he used to walk to with Walter when he was 10. We sat on the porch, sharing slices on mismatched plates. "I've been going to counseling," he said quietly. "Stephanie and I both, marriage counseling, family therapy." I didn't say anything. "I think I let things get out of hand," he added. "I wanted to be a provider so badly that I stopped being present. And I let her talk me into things I knew weren't right." I turned to him. "David, you're not just a husband, you're a father. And once, you were a son who used to bring me daisies from the schoolyard." He looked down at his hands. "Do you think there's any way I can undo what I did?" "No," I said gently. "But you can outgrow it." That night, Leela insisted on showing her dad the garden she and I had been building. She pointed out every plant with pride: sunflowers, cherry tomatoes, basil, and even a tiny row of strawberries. He listened. Really listened. It was the first time I saw a flicker of the boy I remembered, the one with scraped knees and big dreams. Inside the house, a photo album sat on the coffee table. Leela and I had filled it with snapshots, her covered in flour from Baking cookies, our muddy shoes from planting day, her beaming face next to her first sprouting seed. This wasn't just my home. It had become a haven, a place where Leela could be a child, where David could try to be a father again, and where I, Eleanor Whitaker, could reclaim not only my freedom but my purpose, not out of revenge, out of love. 6 months had passed since I moved in next door. The leaves were beginning to change, rich reds and golden yellows dancing along the sidewalks. I sat on the porch wrapped in Walter's old flannel, sipping tea from the chipped mug Leela had painted at summer camp. From where I sat, I could see her bedroom window aglow, a small silhouette moving inside, brushing her hair before bed. We had built something steady, she and I, a rhythm, a refuge every Thursday. She came over to bake. Every Sunday, we planted something new: zinnias, carrots, wildflowers. She now called my house the quiet place, and when she had nightmares or just a bad day, she knew the porch light would always be on. David had changed to slowly, awkwardly, but earnestly. He showed up more, not just physically, but emotionally. He listened when Leela talked about her drawings. He asked her questions. He even asked me questions, though sometimes I could see the shame flicker in his eyes. One evening, as we cleaned up from dinner, he leaned against the sink and asked, "Mom, do you think I'll ever earn back your trust?" I paused, setting down the dish towel. Trust isn't something you win like a trophy, David. It's something you build. And the only way to do that is by showing up again and again, even when it's hard. He nodded slowly. "I'm trying. I really am." I could see that he was. And that counted for something. Stephanie, she took longer. Her apology, when it came, wasn't dramatic. It came during a quiet walk in the backyard while Leela played hopscotch. She stood there, arms crossed, eyes a little red, and said, "I was wrong, Eleanor. I thought money was the only way to secure a future. But I see now security isn't built on control. It's built on love." I didn't forgive her that day, but I didn't shut the door, either. That was the difference between revenge and redemption. And redemption takes time. Meanwhile, I'd made the necessary legal arrangements. The $5 million trust for Leela was locked airtight until she turned 25. I'd also updated my will again. David would only receive a portion of my estate if he continued to show sustained change and emotional responsibility, with oversight through my attorney, Richard. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was trying to shape him into the man Walter believed he could be. Leela deserved a father who knew how to lead with integrity, not just income. One evening, as we looked through a scrapbook Leela made called My Garden with Grandma, she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you." I swallowed hard. "Honey," I said, brushing her hair back, "being strong doesn't mean never getting hurt. It just means knowing who you are when others forget. And never letting anyone take that away." Later that night, I sat alone in the living room with Walter's notebook open on the coffee table. His final words, scribbled in blue ink, stared back at me. "Money without wisdom is just a burden. Wisdom without courage is just a wish. Use both to protect what matters." He was right. The true inheritance wasn't the patents or the cash, it was the values. Dignity, grit, legacy, love. I wasn't just the woman they almost discarded. I was Eleanor Whitaker, guardian of what mattered, keeper of my late husband's vision, protector of my granddaughter's future, and the quiet voice that reminded her family how to find its way back home. And sometimes that's the most powerful role of all. In the end, Eleanor Whitaker didn't need to raise her voice or seek revenge to protect what mattered. With quiet determination, she chose truth over fear, wisdom over wealth, and love over convenience. Her story reminds us that we're never too old to reclaim our worth, never too small to make a stand, and never too late to become the protector of the values we hold dear. She didn't just save her home, she rebuilt her family's moral compass. Not with ultimatums, but with unwavering love and courage. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in what we say, it's in what we stand for. When others try to silence you, underestimate you, or push you aside, remember, your strength doesn't fade with age. In fact, wisdom and time can be your sharpest tools. Use them to stand up, not only for yourself but for the generations watching you. Because legacy isn't just what we leave behind, it's how we live while we're still here. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself or for someone you love? What would you have done in Eleanor's place? And if you believe in stories that empower, uplift, and remind us of who we truly are, subscribe to the channel. There's more where this came from. And remember, sometimes it's the quiet ones who carry the loudest truths.